need. So when I am speaking of pre-need, what I am speaking of is pre-arranging services prior to your death. Okay. When I say at need, I am speaking of at the time of death. Okay. So let's kind of discuss pre-needs. So when you hear pre-needs, what I am speaking of is actually pre-arranging your services prior to your death. Okay. Um, and what that would entail is you actually planning all of your funeral services now. And Angela, I don't know if you have that PowerPoint that I sent you. Um, but I think that's something else that was sent to you, but that's okay. Whenever you do a pre-need, what you are actually doing is sitting down with a funeral home of your choice or a funeral director, and you are actually planning out all of your services. You would be planning where you would want to have the services. You would discuss the amount of funeral services. Now, most people ask, well, why would I want to do a prearrangement? Or most people don't want to talk about it. But what I try to explain to families is that you are taking the burden off of your family. We get a lot of families that are not in agreement with what their loved ones' wishes were. So you have one family member that may say, I heard mama say, or I heard daddy say, and then the other family member said, I didn't hear him say that, or I didn't hear her say that. So it causes a lot of stress on the family members not knowing what decisions to make. Also, as far as the financial part of it, a lot of times families fail to leave financial information for family members. So what I found is that most family members are struggling trying to figure out how they're going to pay for funeral services. So one of the advantages of doing the pre-need is to be able to go ahead and put all of this in writing with the funeral home of your choice. And it usually takes about an hour. And once it's completed, then you would be in a contract with that funeral home with what your wishes are. So when that time comes, then that funeral home will carry out your wishes per your request. Okay. And how that is done is you are to make an appointment with that funeral home, and you are to sit down and go over those wishes. The funeral home will file that pre-need with the North Carolina Board of Funeral Service. Okay. So this entity regulates us as funeral homes and funeral directors. Okay. So they require a copy, you keep a copy, and the funeral home will have a copy. And so I have advised families over the years to make sure that you have a file with all of your derivatives in there. Okay, meaning not just your funeral arrangements, but make sure your family can locate all of your paperwork. Okay, so whether it's your will or whether it's your power of attorney, make sure all of those forms are together. Okay, so that they can find them. Okay, or at least share that information with whomever would be your point of contact or your next of kin. Okay, so there are several ways that you can fund that pre-need. Okay, there are three main ways that you can do that. So if you have insurance already, the insurance that you have, you can use that policy to fund that funeral. For an example, if your service comes to, let's just say $10,000, and you have a $20,000 policy, then what you would be doing is you would be using that $10,000 to fund your pre-planned funeral. Okay, so the funeral home would send your insurance company a copy of your pre-need and a copy of a beneficiary change form that allows the funeral home to receive that $10,000 at the time of your demise. So that means the funeral home is beneficiary of $10,000 of your $20,000 policy. Okay, the difference will go to whoever you would like to be the second primary. Okay, so that's one way that you can fund your funeral. The only thing you would need, if that is the route that you go, is $20. The board requires a $20 filing fee to file that pre-need with them. So that would be all that you would need to bring is the $20, the insurance information, and that's it. Okay, the second way that you can fund is using what we call a trust account. And what we would do is you would make payments on the total of your funeral. So let's just use the same $10,000. And you say, well, I would rather use the trust instead of the policy that I have. Okay, then what you would be doing is monthly paying on this pre-need. Okay, but keep in mind your contract came to $10,000. So you would need to meet that total prior to your demise. Otherwise, the family will owe the difference of what all you have in there versus what's left. Okay. And then the third way is you can purchase insurance to fund the amount of the pre-need. So if the pre-need comes to 10,000, then we can certainly see if you can buy insurance to fund that pre-need at that time. So of course that would be based on age and whatever health questions that they do ask. So those are the three ways that you can actually fund the pre-need, but the pre-need has to be funded through some financial entity in order for it to be a valid pre-need. Okay. So once the pre-need is done, the pre-need is filed with the state board. You don't have to address it again unless you make some changes to it. It also, they do have a contract that will allow you to lock the cost in of the funeral service. And this is the one that is very important to families, okay? So what you're doing when you do the pre-need is you are saying that this is the amount that 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, that I will be paying for my service when that time comes, okay, 30 years from now. So that's one advantage of doing the pre-need. Now you're basically locking in the cost of the funeral now versus what it's going to be 10, 15 years from now. Because honestly, funeral services are going up. I hear all the time that funerals are so expensive. But there are a lot of costs that are involved in funeral service that a lot of people don't realize. And I try to explain to people if I'm hearing some echo or something. Can you all hear me? Okay, so a lot of times it has a lot to do with the economy. So if, for an example, if gas prices go up, then guess what happens? Then they charge us more for delivery. So if they're delivering a casket, then it's more. If they are delivering the vault and they have to, they just charge us more. So those costs, of course, it trickles down to the families and us having to pay more. So a lot of families don't think of it in that way, but as the economy changes, then of course the prices are going to change. And also we have more cremations than we have ever had before. So within our community, I can remember when I first started in funeral service, the cremation rate was probably like 10%. So now the cremation rate is probably like 40% within our community. So if you think about it, the more cremations that we have, the less land the cemeteries are selling, because cemetery property is the same as real property. Okay. So they're selling less spaces now. So they're going up on those spaces. So those of us that do bury, we kind of bear the cost of those that don't. So it's as the economy changes, that's why funeral service changes as well. So one of the advantages of the pre-burial really is to lock in those costs. A lot of people do them for other reasons. I have had several situations where if you have Medicare or Medicaid and you cannot have an insurance policy, a lot of people will do the pre-need to do what you call a spend down. So what you're doing is you're actually spending down your assets. So though that's one of the things that the government will allow you to do is prearrange to spend down that assets, because life insurance policies, they consider those as assets depending on the amount and how much assets you can have. So that varies per person. So that's another reason that a lot of people do the pre-need. And then it just, depending on where the decedent passed, sometimes you have to make a decision of where you want your loved one to go. So yes, if someone passes in the hospital, they have time to decide. But if you pass at hospice, if you pass in a nursing facility, sometimes if you pass at home, then they're wanting you to the family to make a decision immediately of who's gonna remove you. So I tell people, you don't always go to the morgue. It depends on where you pass, that you have to be picked up at that time. A lot of times in the hospital, they will sometimes ask that you make a decision, but you do have a little more time if you pass in the hospital. The family does have more time to make a decision. So a lot of times families don't have time to look to see how much insurance you have or to see where your paperwork is. So that's another reason that it's a good thing to have the pre-needs. So any questions thus far about the pre-needs? Or at all? I do want to say, if you do a pre-need in an establishment, that one of the questions that I do get, if I do a pre-need with an establishment and they go out of business, or I decide down the road that I don't want to be with them, what do I do? So that's twofold question. So if a company or funeral home goes out of business, then those pre-needs that they have to be submitted to the North Carolina Board of Funeral Service. Once again, remember, this is the entity that oversees all of everything that we do. Okay, so they're there really to protect you. So if the company does go out of business, then the state board will take over those pre-needs. And what they will do, what that funeral home has to do, is send a letter to all of those people that have pre-needs to let them know that they have to make another decision, and they have a certain amount of time to make that decision. Otherwise, the North Carolina board will speak with a funeral home of their choice, and they will send those pre-needs to that funeral home that's willing to take those pre-needs. Okay. At any point, if you decide that you want to transfer, you have that right. Okay, so you just go to the funeral home that you choose, and they will guide you in how to transfer that pre-need to them. Okay, it's just a letter that they have to send to the um, other establishment. And so if you don't have your paperwork, so I always encourage people to make sure you have copies of your pre-need. Okay. So any questions about doing the pre-needs? Make sure that if you do decide to do the pre-need, please make sure that the establishment does have a pre-need license. That's a totally separate license than an establishment license. Okay. So that's number one, make sure that they do have a pre-need license, that they're licensed to actually do pre-needs. Okay. So if there are no questions in the chat, we'll just kind of move towards the at need side of it. And the at need is, of course, at the time that the person passes away. Usually the question is, okay, what do I do? Did this just happen? We've never done this before. I have no clue of what to do. So once again, of course, the first thing that you have to do is decide where you want your loved one to go. Okay. There are a lot of reasons. I do know that over the course of the last, I would say, decade, that cost has truly been a factor in decision making. Okay. So you have the right to, at any time, go into any funeral establishment and ask for a general price list. You don't have to do the pre-need. You don't have to, you could just walk in and you can ask for a general price list. Legally, they have to give one to you. Okay. That's any funeral home in North Carolina. Okay, so that's in North Carolina. North Carolina's Board of Funeral Service rule. Okay, that if you have a consumer that walks in, then you have to provide it. Now, if you call, that's different. We're not required to give you specifics over the phone. Okay. So, once you've done that, I encourage families to call the funeral home and set up an appointment with them. A lot of families get upset. You never know if the funeral home's on a funeral, on a service. You don't know what directors are available. One thing that I have shared with a lot of my families is that you have to be licensed to really see families. And a lot of families don't know that. So if they go into an establishment and they cannot be accommodated at the time, a lot of families don't understand that. But by law, in order for us to discuss prices or for me to show you merchandise, you have to have a license. Okay. So I always encourage families to call that funeral home and set up a time that you all can meet to begin your arrangements. Another thing that I say is also, of course, contact your pastor, your church, and go ahead and start to see what their availability is if you are planning an actual funeral. Okay. Know your church. We have a lot of different church rules now in Greensboro since COVID. A lot of things have changed. So, and a lot of times your family may not go to church with you. So they may not know if you are in a church that don't have Saturdays and Sunday funerals, make sure your family knows that. Okay. A lot of churches now are getting away from weekend services. Okay, so make sure that you have that in your paperwork somewhere so that they know, so they don't get upset with the church. And then, so make sure you speak with your church, talk to them about what services that they will provide for you. All churches don't do repast anymore. All churches will not do your program. So these are things that I told people, make a note of it. It's okay. Make sure you make a note of that so that your family will know. And then once you've made that appointment, then of course you come in and you begin your funeral arrangements. And kind of moving to a lot of questions people have, it like, how much are funerals now? It's really, really hard to say because you all know every funeral home is different. But I will tell you that complete burials and funerals are at least 10 and up. They just are. And I'm speaking of the cemetery as well. Okay. Because keep in mind, you have to have the space. Okay. You have to have the opening and closing, and those costs have nothing to do with the funeral home. These are the cemetery costs that have nothing to do with our costs. So you have to have a vault. So in North Carolina, there is not a law that you have to have a vault. That's been a misconception. Okay. That's not a law. What it is a requirement by the cemetery. Okay, so after the floods that we had down east several years back, I can't remember, I think it's been about 12 or 15 years. But after that, the cemetery started requiring, yes, we want them to have a vault. Okay, or what we call a liner. It does not have to be a vault. It can be what we call a grave liner. That's just a non-sealed container. So yes, you can have that, but they came together and kind of came up with this rule, but it's not a law. So, there are some cemeteries that will bury without a vault. We have a Muslim cemetery, they don't use a vault or a casket. It's just their religion. So it's not by law, but it's most of the cemeteries. Okay. So I would imagine in the next 5, 6, 7 years that funeral services will be $18,000. I'm just being very transparent with you. So I advise everyone to kind of just look at your policies, and just kind of think about, okay, I know I'm going to have this. What else do I want to leave behind for my loved ones? Okay. And one thing as we're talking about insurance that I encourage everyone to kind of just think about is making sure that look at your policies every couple of years, every 5 years, every 6, 7, 8 years, because I've noticed a lot of people have term policies, and those policies are fine. They're okay. They're better than nothing. They're good, but they do term out. So please understand, when you are purchasing policies or you have policies, that you understand the difference between your whole life policies versus your term policies. Your term policies will term out. Okay. There's a possibility you can outlive that policy. And I'm not saying that they're bad. Okay. But I'm just saying, just keep in mind that you can outlive those. All right. Whole life, of course, is used as long as you pay the premium, that policy is there. Okay. Also, I had a case recently where the decedent had a term policy that they switched to a whole life. So if you are familiar, term policies, you can turn them at some point into a whole life policy, but it started a 2-year contestability period. What is that? That means if you are just taking out a policy and you pass within 2 years, there is a 9 times out of 10 possibility that that company will not pay that funeral home. They will pay back your premiums. Every policy, for the most part, you can find one or two that are like final expense policies that don't have that in there. But mostly all policies have contestability in their language. Okay. So when you get your policy, if you really, really read through it, you'll find it. Okay. And what that gives the insurance company the ability to do is to go back usually 5 to 7 years and pull your medical records. All right. And your medical records have to be exactly what you said on that application. All right. And they tend to find something that's not supposed to be there, or maybe the question wasn't asked to you thoroughly, and they'll find a reason not to pay it. So most funeral homes don't take 2-year contestability policies. Okay, some may. I know that I don't. But if it's been within 2 years, I've only in my career have seen maybe 3 or 4 of them go through. Okay, or they pay the full face amount. So just keep that in mind. So a lot of people wait till they're not well, they wait till they have been diagnosed, or they wait till they're sick and they get the policies, and then something happens, then the family can't use it. And most of the time, the family does not understand that they do not understand when they're grieving contestability. That is a hard thing to explain, okay, to families when they're grieving. So just keep that in mind with insurance. Another thing, GoFundMe's, they do not work. So I just want to be very transparent. GoFundMe do not work. And the time period that you have, there's never enough time to collect the money and then have the money released to you through the bank, because there's some smaller loopholes with actually getting the money from the GoFundMe situation. So I try to tell people the GoFunds, they don't work at all. So that was one of the main things that I really wanted to discuss is insurance, cost of services, also just making sure that, yes.
Okay, I did 20 years in the military, and we had the SGLI, and then after I retired, I still have that going.
Right.
It's called SGLI. So do I need to look at that?
Usually SGLI is good. Let me just tell you something about how that works. I did 10 years in the military as well. So I don't know if you know it or not, but you get a free space, you get a vault, you get a marker, you get the opening and closing, okay? But you have to use a national cemetery. So the closest one here would be Salisbury. Okay, so the only thing that your family would be responsible for is the funeral side of it. Okay, but all the other things, you get your military rights, you get your flag. Make sure that you have a DD 214 with your paperwork. You can also register that with the Guilford County Register of Deeds. You can go down there and say, I need to register my DD 214. So
it's
I was
down
just
in Onslow County. It's down at the courthouse.
Yep. Okay. So you've registered yours. And the one thing about the military, though, and other federal entities, they will not let the funeral home do what we call an assignment on the funeral cost. So what I am saying is that at the time, so let's just say you have not done the pre-need we discussed, okay? And let's just say you worked for the school or you worked for the federal government, or the city, they will not work directly with the funeral home like private insurance companies do. Okay. they will pay the family directly, and the family has to pay the funeral home. So if you've never planned a service and you don't understand all of that, so what happens is if you bring a policy, private policy, not state, just a private policy that you took out, then what happens is we will use that policy to fund your services, and we will ask that insurance company to pay us directly. Okay. And that's how the services are funded. But I will tell you this, if you retired from the city or you retired or it's military, they will not pay the funeral home directly. Okay. They will not, we're considered a third party, and they will not work directly with the third party. And so what happens in those cases is case by case. So, it's really a case by case basis. Some families will say, well, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to take care of it, and we'll deal with the insurance. And you have some funeral homes that are willing to wait until the family's paid. So it just depends on, in those cases, how that is. But yes, if you have that, you have, with them, you have plenty.
Does that take long for them to pay the family?
The private insurances, no. Okay. But the city and the state, though, sometimes they can take 4 to 6 weeks. I tell people 4 to 6 weeks. Because remember, you have to have a registered death certificate before any funds are paid, period. Okay. And that takes about 5 to 7 business days before you can get a death certificate certified. So there is a process with those death certificates. The doctor has to sign. The health department has to sign off on it. And then it goes to the Register of Deeds to be certified. So it's a process with getting death certificates. So once the death certificate gets to the actual insurance companies, that is when the actual claim starts. Like, we can start the claim, but it doesn't truly go into effect until you get that to them, because that confirms that, yes, this person is deceased. So once they get a death certificate, then that starts the process. And from there, it usually takes about 4 weeks before they pay out. Yeah. So any other questions? Insurance, pre-needs, at needs, costs. And one of the other things that I did want to touch on, because I know you all have another presenter, but make sure that I tell everybody, make sure you have a will. And I won't go too far into that because, I like to leave that up to attorneys. That's their specialties. But make sure that you have a will, and make sure that you have a power of attorney. Please know that those are two different things. They're, families that come and they have power of attorney, well, that's null and void when you pass away. Okay. Your power of attorney appoints your financial derivatives, or who you would like to handle your financial or your health, if you cannot make those decisions for yourself. But once you pass away, your will is what takes place once you pass away. So I tell people, even if you have clothes, even if you don't, most people say, well, I don't have nothing. Even if it's just a car, I see people, before we can even have the service, they're trying to figure out who's going to go get the car, who's going to go get their clothes, who's going to go get the rings, like how we're going to split all this up. So I tell people it is so important. We think we don't have a lot, but if you really sit down and you start writing things down, even your personal items, you have more than what you know. You really do. And so it's important, especially if it's not a husband and wife situation, if you have several children or you didn't have children, and you know, you're not married and it becomes siblings, it becomes, so it can get kind of complicated if you don't have all of this written out. Yes.
Can a will be notarized?
Yes. Okay. So this is what North Carolina says. You can write out your wishes. You can have a witness and you can have it notarized and it is valid. Okay. However, I always suggest just doing a consultation with an attorney. Because, you know, some of them will do a free consultation with you because there is language in these wills that if you have any issues with family, they can question what you actually wrote out versus what you've done through the attorney. Because the attorney will have their witnesses, they will have it notarized for you, and they will have it filed. And they have a copy, you have a copy. So there's no question about, did you really do this? You know, I get people say, well, they were not in their right mind. They had started having dementia. They didn't do this, or, you know, or you were there, persuaded them, and they didn't. So, you know, it's always good if you can to have an attorney
What
to draft it.
what about the legal attorneys on the base?
Yes.
That's good.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
I had a will, um, but the thing is, I have to revise it because I had my brother on there and he passed, so I just need to get it. I need to redo it, so I'm just in the
I am
process of
glad you
doing that.
said that. Please, if you have beneficiaries that passed away, please change all of your stuff. Because if you pass away and you have a beneficiary of a person that passed before you, your things can end up in the estate. And then the clerk of courts decides. Okay. So if you don't have a will, they will, whoever's the next of kin, become administrators over what you have. They have to submit everything that you have to the courts. And then the courts tell them how they can divide it up, sell it, or that they are, or they can have it. Okay. But the courts have to decide that. And so I try to encourage people not to let the courts decide how to divide up your stuff. So, so yes, please change it. Make sure that you don't have minors, like if you have minor children or if you're thinking about your grandchildren that are under 18, please keep in mind we can't do contracts with them. So if you have a policy and it's in your granddaughter's name and she's 10, well, she can't come in and make funeral arrangements for you. So she can't sign that policy over. So that policy will go to a trust for her till she's 18. Because legally, I can't use it. I can't have her agree that she wants to pay for your services. So we get a lot of people that leave it to their minor children, but they don't realize like they can't do a contract. And so a lot of times that will either go to a trust for them, depending on what type of policy you have. Sometimes policies will, when you write them, they will have a trust portion in it. And who would you want to be the trustee, especially if you have a minor child on there? And then that trustee can oversee those funds for that minor child. Okay. But some of them I've seen that the child had to wait till they were 18. So, because nobody can spend those funds for that child if it's for that child. So, so be careful of minors being on your policies. If so, I would set up a trust for them for that money.
Can I read something to you?
Sure.
Okay, my daughter sent me this. She said, some lady sent this to her. It says, before you pass away, remove your kids as the beneficiaries of everything that you own. You don't want that. If you want to pass down your assets to them after you pass away, then put all of your assets you own in a revocable trust and
Mhm.
then make your kids the beneficiary of that trust.
Right.
When you go to when you go this route, your kids can bypass what is called the probate period.
Probate.
And that process can be very long, strenuous, and ugly. When you put the assets in a trust, your kids have immediate access to the assets when you pass away.
Mhm.
Also, you want to have a life insurance policy that covers your mortgage so that when you pass away, your policy will pay off the mortgage. And now your kids own the property outright.
That's correct. So the trust, so you would set it up as like some policies will let you say as the beneficiary, like I did this for my minor children when they were minor, the trust of their names. Then I named where that trust was set up at. So you can set trust up, you can set it through the bank. You know, some banks don't do them anymore because they don't like to, you know, to oversee that because basically they're overseeing it for you when you pass away. So meaning whomever the trustee is, they can go in, you know, whoever you name as the trustee, the person that's going to help the children navigate through this, they can go in and say, Jackie needs $100 or she needs $10,000 for college. She's ready for college now. So we need to set up, you know, and that, like you said, prevents probate. That's just the person or even the child can go in there and just say, I need a living expense. And that trust that's set up, they're able to access those funds. So that prevents it from going to probate. But it's gonna go if you don't have none of this, you know, kind of written out. So when you do the will, in the will, you name where that trust is and who those minor children are. And then, like you said, you have to revise it if they turn 18 and you don't want the trust anymore. You may want them to get a portion of it at 18. You may want another portion to stay in the trust so that they don't use it all at one time. So it's you can, and that's what attorneys do. They kind of you give them a vision of what you would want to see if you're not here. Basically, it's how do you want things to look if you're not here anymore? So they help you begin to put all of that together on what that should look like. And sometimes your insurance will have, they can pay off your house, some of them are your mortgage company. So you have to call and you have to ask the questions if you don't know. Do you have, you know, anything that a product or that I can add to what I have where my mortgage, if something happens to me, will automatically be paid up. So you have to call, you have to kind of ask them if they have that that you can add to your mortgage. Yeah. So that it'll be paid. They don't have a mortgage. Yeah. And if you are husband, wife, and let's just say husband passes away and you know the house, you have to get all those things changed over just into your name. Don't assume that everything automatically changes because if something happens to you then it's still his heirs and your heirs, and let's just say there's stepchildren involved. So you gotta just make sure that you're revising your will, you know, when things happen in your life and changes are made, you have to make those changes. And that's a little off of the funeral side of it, but I'd like to kind of just touch on that a little bit because that's very important. That's one of the problems that we run into is people think the power of attorney gives them the rights to make the funeral arrangement, and it does not. it ends at death. Every child, biological child, if it's a parent that passed away, has rights. Okay. The person who paying is different than who has rights. So a stranger can come in and say, well, I just want to pay for somebody's service today. Okay, that's fine. But the next of kin have the rights. So a lot of times families think, well, I'm paying it, so I have to say that's not true. All the biological, the next of kin have rights. If your husband and wife, it's your spouse. Okay, it's the same as North Carolina. All the as it ascends down. Okay, so if you're not married, it's kids. Okay, if you don't have children and you have a parent, don't have children, no, you know, you're not married, don't have a parent, it's your siblings. So if you got 10 siblings, then 10 siblings have the right to say how this is going to go. Okay, so it has nothing to do all the time with who's paying. That could be two totally different, you know, that could be totally different or the same people or person. Okay, but they all have to agree. It's hard to do arrangements when families are not agreeing. So that's why the pre-need is important. So I know I've been an hour. So do we have any more questions about processes, pre-needs, ed needs,
Yes, I
costs?
just have one question.
Mhm.
So on one of my policies that I have, when you were just talking about the minor children, so I do have a minor child, and my policy doesn't list my family member as a trustee; they list them as a custodian.
Do you
So
have
what's
do you have a will? Have you
I
set up
do
a will?
because she's the only child. She's my only. She would
Oh,
be
she's your only.
yes. So and it says in about the Uniform Transfers, the Minors Act. So I guess it says that should be better than me actually doing the trust, or should I still do the trust?
I would. How old is your
She's
child?
9.
Oh yeah. And you said you do have a will?
Yes. So I have one. I did it through my job. So yes, I still have a will,
Oh, through your
even though she's
job?
my only. Yes.
I would suggest doing an attorney just to ask the
Okay.
question. I would I would strongly suggest, and they will do a free, ask them, will they do a free consultation with you for you to sit down and really, because I think you custodian is different than the trust. It's like two totally different things. So I would think you would still need the trust set up for her. She can still get she can get what she needs. It's just, it's better to have a trust because custodian is a little different than the trust. Because she would still need somebody to walk her into getting the money. Like they're not even gonna write the policy to her. They can't send the money to her. She can't cash it. So it's, you probably still going to need a trust for those monies to be written into that policy for that money to be released into that trust. Then someone can physically take her to, you know, withdraw the money, you know. So yeah, because the insurance company is not going to write a check or anything to her. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about insurance? I did forget to mention that make sure that they, you know, as we get older, those policies get expensive. They really do. They get really expensive. The younger we are, the less expensive that they are. Like I've had policies on my kids since they were like 6 months, and they're little over $1, and their whole life policies, they As long as I pay the premium, they have it. And I can even transfer it to them and they can be the owners. They don't even ever have to get one as long as the premium's paid on it. So in a sense, you kind of outpay it. So if you have it while they 6 months, and of course, over the course of 50 years or so, but what you pay on it is worth it when they're younger. The older you get, the more health issues that you have, they're gonna be expensive. They just are. Because it's like I think it's like a 5 year or so increment that those premiums change. So it changes at 50, it changes at 55, it changes at 60. So, because the insurance companies, remember, they are there to make money. They are. They don't know you, they don't know me, they don't know us. They just know what they see on paper about you and your health and whether or not what type of risk that they have to take with you. So whether or not they're going to get enough premiums in versus face amount out. So just keep that in mind that the older we get, the harder it's going to be to pay on these insurance policies because they get expensive. But we do have products though that are out there that if you're just saying, okay, well, I just need enough just for a funeral, there are policies that you can get policies for $3,000. You can get policies for 4 or 5. So, it's better to have something for the family to work with than to not have anything.
Is it a good
Yeah.
girl to get an insurance policy, life insurance policy through your job, or would it be better to get one like independently of your job? Like out?
Having it through the job is fine. Yeah, if you have one through your job, that's okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
because usually through the jobs, they're more, they're more reasonable because they do group policies. So it's like a whole group of individuals that they're insuring, so they get a different rate. So they're usually more reasonable. I would just look at how much it is and just make sure that it's enough that you would want, you got to think about, okay, funeral. Okay, what do I want to leave? Like, how much do I want to leave? Some families decide they don't want to leave anything, and that's okay too, but you got to think about that. So I just say, look at it, make sure it's enough. If it's not enough, they don't offer enough. I do have some families that decide to purchase an additional policy just to handle the funeral side of it. But yes, the job policies are fine.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Mrs. Tiffany Woodard Rawnex, we thank you for your awesome plethora of information. You gave us a lot to think about. A lot of times we do not think about these things to the last minute, but you gave us a lot of valuable information on tonight. And we really, truly appreciate everything you brought to us on tonight.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it was our pleasure because we needed the information that you gave us on tonight, and we appreciate it. At this time, we do have a second presenter for you all tonight. And at this time, we would like to bring forth Miss Kimberly Dickerson of KLB Brand Funeral Services. Please welcome her as she provides important information about planning services.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kimberly Dickerson, and I am the owner of the KLD brand, and our financial services under that includes life insurance is KLD Enterprises. So I'll be talking to you, just elaborate more on life insurance. Do we have the PowerPoint that was sent over?
Yeah, she's gonna put it up for you.
So Mrs. Woodard-Rawnex touched on a lot of what I'm already going to touch on. So I will not be before you long, but I'll just elaborate some on what she said, especially when it comes to the insurance part of it. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Because I know my network is kind of shoddy with this outage.
Yes, we hear you fine.
Yeah.
Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Do you have it up? It's just, okay. All right. You can slide on down to the next slide. Are you able to make it bigger? Okay. Thank you. So one thing that we have to think about that a lot of us don't like to think about is one day we're going to die. And we just don't know the time or the place. We just know it's going to happen. Right. And when we do pass away, you can go down to the next one. A little too far. Keep going up some. Okay. So if you were to pass away today, I want some of you all to think about some of this and interact because it is getting late, so I'm getting a little sleepy. If you were to pass away today, what would your loved ones be doing tomorrow? Anybody? Okay. You can go ahead and scroll down. Go ahead.
Trying to find all my account numbers and passwords and everything like that.
Okay. Okay, that's something they would definitely have to do that. Anybody else? Okay. You can go ahead down to the next one. So when you pass away, there's going to be a lot of different things that your family has to do. They're going to have to contact family and friends, locate insurance if you have it. They're going to have to ask for time off, ask other family members for help, like take care of the home, try to sleep. If you've ever been through it, one thing you always have to do is remember to eat, because there's always somebody asking you, have you ate today? Even though all that chicken and everything is there, you still have to remember to eat. And then they still have to hold everything together. And on top of that, they also have to plan a funeral. And while they're doing all of that, if you look on the other side where it says mindful, this is everything that's going through their mind. So if all of this is going on, when do they actually have the time to grieve? You can go ahead to the next one. This next slide is going to show you, like, it's 5 steps in the grieving process. So while your family is going through all of this, do you think they can manage these 5 steps on top of having to plan your funeral if you died unexpectedly? Or if you've been sick for quite some time, some people go ahead and start that pre-planning process, or they may have done a pre-needs, but they still need to grieve as well. So go ahead to the next slide. So while they're trying to grieve and handle everything, take care of home, take care of other loved ones, do you believe it's fair for them to have to worry about all of your final expenses if you do not have a life insurance policy or something in place on top of trying to grieve? So you have to think about, will your death leave your family with dollars or debt? And this shows the average cost of your final expenses. And your final expenses is not just your funeral costs. This could be taxes that you owed on your home, anything to deal with the upkeep of your home or your lifestyle until your estate is handled. There's somebody that may have to take care of all of that until they're able to get reimbursed. Go ahead to the next slide. So if you have a spouse or a loved one, you know, your income is going to be at least cut in half or cut 100%. If you're a homemaker and your spouse is the one that's bringing in all the income, their death could just drastically change your family's income altogether. And without a life insurance policy or something else in place before the estate is handled, would your family be able to survive? Next slide, please. This presentation, the way I operate is I like to give you something to think about as to the reason why certain things should be handled. Like Miss Tiffany talked about your power of attorney, having everything down. It's just important to have everything in writing, because when this time comes, if you've never been through this, your mind is going to be in 1,001 places, and it'll be so much easier if everything was already pre-planned and in writing before that time comes. And here it shows like your medical expense. I have so many people tell me that, no, I don't need a life insurance policy. I have money in savings that will take care of this when that time comes. But if you don't have a long-term care policy, what if you need to go into a nursing home? Some people, 100% of people really can't afford it if they don't have that type of income or a long-term care policy, because being in a nursing home is very expensive. And they take all of your Social Security if you have it. If you have a home, you're only allowed to have $2,000 to your name in order for Medicaid to step in to assist with that. So if you have all of that money in savings, it's gone. One illness can wipe your entire bank account away. The next slide, please. You can keep going. So today, a traditional funeral can cost you anywhere between $7,000 to $12,000, and this is just an average cost depending on your location and the funeral home that you use. Because believe it or not, funeral homes can be a mile apart, and they can be thousands of dollars in difference. You can keep going. And I know a lot of people are leaning towards cremation now, but as you can see, cremations can easily cost anywhere between $2,000 to $9,000, and that depends on the type of cremation that you have. Some people would like to have a direct cremation, which means there's no viewing, no memorial service or anything like that. They just want their body to be cremated, ashes turned over to the family. That would be on the cheaper end. But if you would like to have a memorial service before, or like a viewing or anything after you're cremated with your urn and things like that, the cost can easily go up. The next slide, please. So this slide here, just give you some numbers to look at. This is based off the National Funeral Directors Association 2021 general price list. And as you can see, for a traditional burial, these are just prices that's broke down on things that will be included in your service. And a lot of people sticks out to me on this price list is acknowledgement cards. If you've ever done a burial service or just a funeral service in general, they always give you a box of acknowledgement cards. And like looking at the cost of these things, like Miss Tiffany said, you can ask for that general price list, and you'll be able to see these different things and what to include in your service that'll help with that cost. The next slide, please. And here, even after everything is taken care of on the funeral side, like Miss Tiffany said, the cemetery costs, which has nothing to do with the funeral home, it depends on the cemetery. And if anybody can come off mute and tell me the last time you've seen a new cemetery somewhere, it could be a prize for you. Because if you think about it, I know I've never seen one. The same cemeteries that's been around since I was little are the same ones that I see today. And so that lack of land, it's there. you can go down to the next slide, please. So this slide here is just national statistics. And I always show people this slide because I hear a lot of times, oh, I don't want to think about it right now. I'll get it when I'm older. Oh, I'm healthy. I've never been to the doctor. But if you look here, and we'll look at age 50 now, if we were to put 100 people in a room in the age range of 50 to 59, 24 out of those 100 people died today. And that's just to put it in like a realistic aspect of how people are just dying. And also for me, just personal with my husband, I always told like, okay, we're young. He had a heart attack at 37. He's still here. But the day before his heart attack, we actually got a life insurance policy on him the day before. He tells me I'm bad luck for writing a life insurance policy on him. I cause a heart attack. But that's neither here nor there. But I always say time is of the essence because we never know. The healthiest person I knew didn't no type of medication. Now he has a nightstand full of medication just at the age of 37. So, and now that same policy we wrote the day before, if we would have waited a day, he would no longer qualify for that policy simply because he had a heart attack. So time is of the essence when it comes to getting any type of insurance put in place. The next slide, please. So if you were to pass away today, would your family be prepared for all the financial burdens that would bring about? And that's something just for everyone to think about. If you were to pass away, would your spouse or your children, would they be able to afford to go down to the funeral home and have the burial that you would love for them to have for you with what you have in place today? Okay, next slide, please. So the choice is yours, whether you do something today that will benefit your family when they're going to need it the most, or your loved ones will have to handle all of that later. You can keep going. So one other thing that stands out with people is I don't need life insurance. Social Security will handle that. They'll pay it. But as you can see from this slide, that over 60 years, it has never increased, that your surviving spouse or minor children will receive a one-time whopping payment of $255 when you pass away. So if you don't have a spouse or minor children, there's no money for anybody to get. And for our veterans, after serving your country, they can get a reimbursement of $796. But I'm going to show you some more for the veterans on the next slide. You can go ahead now. So as you see, that $796, that's if you pass away in a VA hospital. If you pass away at home or anywhere else, they'll get a reimbursement of $300. And here on the left side, it shows what everything that you're given if you're buried in a national cemetery. A private cemetery that will only cover your headstone or your marker. And these are all reimbursements that the family can apply for. And also with that, I know they changed the veterans insurance, life insurance here not too long ago. And if you are 100%, you do qualify for up to $10,000 in life insurance coverage that they will pay for you with their new plan. If you're not 100%, it is structured based on your disability rating. So that is something you can check into as well to get additional coverage from the VA. Okay, next slide, please. So looking at these two checks, the decision is yours when it comes to purchasing your life insurance. If you decide, something that I don't want, my family will handle it, Would you rather for your family to write one large check to the funeral home, or would you like to write a small check monthly to a life insurance company? Okay. Next slide, please. So here's where I'm gonna break down a little bit about different types of policies, your term versus your permanent whole life. Like your permanent policies are considered to be your whole life insurance policies. They're permanent because as long as you make that premium payment, that insurance will not go away. The only way to cancel that is if you call in and cancel it or simply just not make the payment. And coming from an agent, I always tell people how you can judge if an agent is good for you or not. If an agent tells you without looking at your situation that a term policy is better for you than a whole life policy, or vice versa, that agent is not a good agent for you because they're only trying to benefit them. Because without someone sitting down with you and looking at your entire situation, there's no way that anyone can tell you which policy fits what is best for you. If you have minor children, a term policy coupled with a whole life policy could be best for you, because I call term policies lifestyle policies. Because if you have a large mortgage, minor children that needs to be taken care of, anything like that, you would want to get a term life policy because one, they're cheaper and you get the larger face amounts. And so you will want to be able to make sure those children are taken care of, your mortgage is paid off, different things like that. If your children are not in college yet, or if they're in college, you want to make sure their tuition is paid, then yes, a term policy is something that's good to have. But I always say, if you get a term policy, couple it with a whole life policy, because the younger you are, the cheaper it is. And you're able to get more coverage for less when you're younger. So I have people like whole life policy on a child, $5 a month, they have 50,000 in coverage. That policy will always be $5 a month, versus waiting till the child is 50 and maybe they've had a couple illnesses. Now they only can get 10,000 and they're paying $70 a month for a $10,000 policy. Okay. And this here, it shows some different types of your permanent life insurance, which is whole life, final expense, and your universal life insurance companies. And universal life, a lot of people, that was one, the agents, we call them the debit agents, that used to come to the door, not to collect payment. They sold a lot of your universal life policies years ago. And if you currently have a universal life policy, I would suggest pulling that policy out and having it reviewed, because they sold those policies telling you you only need to make this small payment to have all of this insurance. But what they didn't tell you is you needed to pay more than that minimum payment to keep it. And now those insurance policies, people are outliving them. Or when that person passes away and the family member goes to the funeral home with it, there's nothing there for them to pay for those final expenses. Next slide, please. So one of the questions is always asked, what is the best type of policy to use for your funeral expenses? And those policies would be a final expense or a burial policy. And they're pretty much one and the same. A lot of people, they either call them burial plans or final expense or funeral plan. Does anybody have any questions or anything at this moment about any type of insurance? No questions? You can go down to the next slide, please. So this here is a small checklist when it comes to searching for a final expense company. We know, like when we go out to eat, all of our restaurants have a sanitation grade. So all of our insurance companies, we have what we call a sanitation grade but we're graded through the Better Business Bureau and Better. And if you go into a restaurant and that restaurant has a sanitation grade of 80%, will you eat there? Most people are going to turn their nose up and walk out the doors like something going on in the kitchen. The dining room looks clear, but if it's at 80%, something's wrong in the kitchen, so I'm definitely not eating there. So these are just some questions you can look at that when you're searching for your final expense company, what you would ask. You can ask any agent these questions and you check off which one works best. And cheap is not always good when it comes to your life insurance policy, especially if you're older and you have some health issues and there's a 2-year wait on your life insurance. And there's a difference between a 2-year wait and the 2-year contestability. So the 2-year wait means, depending on the company, they will not pay out if you pass away within the first 2 years of having that policy. And that's your 2-year wait. Most companies will only pay your family whatever you paid in it. Some companies will pay whatever you paid in plus a percentage, okay? And that's your 2-year wait if you die within that 2-year wait. And like Ms. Tiffany said, the 2-year contestability is just that insurance company covering themselves. They will still pay out as long as you did not lie on your life insurance application. They want to pull all of your medical records just to make sure there's nothing in there and that you answer all of your questions truthfully. And as long as you answer them truthfully, it takes them a little bit longer to pay. They don't pay out immediately. But if you were truthful, it does pay out, okay? And on this checklist, one of the main things I see like that stands out is, does that policy pay approved claims in 24 hours? Majority of life insurance companies do not pay for 4 to 6 weeks after processing your claim and it's approved. The particular company here listed as the Funeral Advantage program is Lincoln Heritage. They take pride in paying their claims within 24 hours of receiving proper notification and approved claims. So if your policy, if you're outside of that 2-year contestability, or you have that day one coverage, they will pay 80% of those funds within 24 hours to your beneficiaries. So that way you're able to go ahead and take care of your final expenses. And the other 20% is paid once you receive the death certificate. And it says within 24 hours because your beneficiary has the option if they want those funds direct deposited or overnight checks sent to them to help those final wishes, okay? And the medical exam, your final expense coverage, there's no medical exam. There's only health questions, yes or no health questions that you have to answer. With Lincoln Heritage, they only have 9. They're one of the easiest companies you can qualify for. They cover anyone ages, in North Carolina, anyone 0 to 85 can get a policy with Lincoln Heritage in their Funeral Advantage program, no matter your health. They just have 3 plans that you will fall under. And it's whether you get day one coverage, a 2-year wait, or a 3-year wait. And they do pay a higher percentage per year on that wait. So if you do qualify for a 2-year return of premium plan, they pay out, if you pass away in that first year, your beneficiaries receive everything you paid in plus 10%. That second year is everything you paid in plus 20%, and then it pays that full amount on that 3rd year there. Can you go ahead down to the next slide? So this right here is just a checklist of comparing companies still, and you look at the Funeral Advantage plan. This is one company. I am an independent broker, so I do sell for many companies, but I do speak a lot on Lincoln Heritage and the Funeral Advantage program because this is one company that I truly stand behind because not only do they pay fast, your family does get emotional support and a funeral advisor that helps your family along the process. I wanted to show you all those first slides about grieving and what all your family goes through during that process, because when you're grieving, you make a lot of emotional decisions. So they could tell you mama could have wore pink every day and the family thought mama's favorite color was pink. But in reality, it was yellow. She just liked the way pink looked on her skin. So by you being able to have everything in writing and your family having that emotional support and guidance, it helps them make better decisions. And I don't know if you all can see, but because my background is blurry, but this is a final wishes organizer. I do want to make sure everyone gets one of those. I have my contact information in like the very last slide, but this final wishes organizer, we call this the final love letter to your family. So in this guide, you're able to go ahead and detail out all of your final wishes. What songs you want played, what color you want, where important documents are, and different things like that. The main page in this book is your obituary, because I always tell people, go ahead and write out your obituary, because you will be dead and gone. And that one name that was left out of that obituary, the family will be arguing about. And I know we've all been there and been through it. So if you haven't already, go ahead and write it out. So there's no arguing while you're gone. And if it is, they can go to your grave and argue with you. Okay. And then I do have another guide. It's just facts about funeral planning, that if anybody wants those guides, I will definitely get them out to you. You can the next slide has my phone number and my email. So I do want to make sure everybody gets a copy of those. Does anybody have any questions about anything? Because I am wrapping it up.
This has been very informative for me. Thank you so much.
Okay. Fast, because I know it's getting kind of late. And I wanted to make sure I got through as much information as possible. So if there are no questions, I can go into detail about any of the insurance plans or anything like that. If you would like to schedule an appointment with me, this is all my contact information here. If you currently have a life insurance policy, I do offer free policy reviews. Because one of my main things is I always like to make sure that whatever an agent told you you have, that you actually have it. Because if it's not in your contract, it doesn't mean anything. And there are a lot of crooked agents out here that do take advantage of people just for a commission. So if you do not understand what you're looking at in your life insurance policy, please reach out to me and we can go through your policy page by page just to make sure you understand it. You have. Okay. And if you have any other questions, you can always ask me about the Funeral Advantage program too. They also, all of the stuff that you fill out in this book, having a plan with them, they actually put it all on file for your family, your power of attorneys and all of that. So you can secure all of that stuff in one place. So your family can call one number to get everything that they need to take care of any of your final wishes. So thank y'all for allowing me to speak. But if there are no questions, I will turn it back over.
Okay, Miss Kimberly Dickerson, we want to thank you for your presentation. It was an awesome presentation because you hit some things that we really need, especially during the grieving and emotional support, which are very, very important. People go through a lot on a passing, and it's a lot to deal with. And you did give us a lot of information on that and the importance of different services. And we want to thank you.
And thank you for having me.
Oh, our pleasure, our pleasure. We just want everyone to know that the Royal Grand Princess matron will be sending out the slides from the two presenters on tonight. So you will be getting this slides with all their information. And at this time, we have had an awesome night of information, and we just are so grateful for them coming out and providing us with the things that will help us in
You guys, I think she went mute. I know that they are having some issues there in that area as far as with the internet and things going out. But again, I'm Program Perfect Matron, right? I just wanted to definitely thank Royal Matron Anjali Sims and Royal Matron Sylvia Little for their work on this presentation. It was a vision of mine that I had for this year, wanted us to do something because as Ms. Tiffany said, GoFundMe accounts are not the way to go. So I wanted to make sure that we have information and that we have resources or people that we can contact in order to get the necessary information that we need for our end of life. Again, I thank you guys so very much for attending. I do see one of my good friends here, Right Grand Thrice, Marvin Williams from the jurisdiction of North Carolina. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Again, thank you to all the Royal Matrons here from the state of North Carolina. Thank you so very much for joining us. I will be sending out the presentations here later tonight. If you do need any additional information, you are able to contact those ladies and ask them any questions or concerns that you may have, and hopefully they can help you or point you in the right direction. Does anybody have any questions or concerns for me that you need addressed on tonight? Not everybody speak at once.
No, we just want to thank you for the opportunity to allow us to have this program. We apologize on our end. We are experiencing issues with the spectrum outage, but we want to thank you for allowing us to have this program.
No, ma'am, you are fine. Like I said, I thank you ladies so very much. I know that I send you guys a lot of messages, but when I ask you ladies do come through for me, and I do appreciate you. And just know that there's more programs coming in the pipeline, you guys. So again, I thought this was one that we all needed. So there was some very good information that was passed along tonight. And I do thank the two presenters for joining us tonight and giving us that very informative information that I think that we all need. So again, if we don't have any other questions or concerns, I'm going to ask my favorite past program perfect matron, Phyllis Eton McLeod. Are you still here?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
I appreciate you so very much, ma'am. If you would lead us out in prayer, please, ma'am.
Let us go to the throne of grace. Most kind and gracious God, our Father, Father of every good and perfect gift, Lord Jesus, we come humbly thanking you, God, for allowing us to be a part of this workshop. We ask a special blessing on both of our presenters, God, as they have given us invaluable information that will be very beneficial to everyone on the call. God, we just thank you for enabling us to have workshops of this type. We thank you for our leadership in our Royal Grand Perfect Matron as the committee that prepared this workshop for us. We thank them as well. God, we give you all of the praise, honor, and the glory, for it is in your matchless name that we do pray. Amen.
Amen. Again, thank you guys so very much. If nobody has anything for me, everyone have a blessed night. In North Carolina, I'll see you back home soon.
Said we would love to go to the Kentucky Derby. Okay?
Thank
Good night.
you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.